New here tonight, he spent his entire life living and working in the United States, but when it came time to collect his Social Security benefits, one Florida man says he has not received one penny.
Instead, he got a surprise reality check. The government told him he's not who he says he is, and now he's been fighting to prove them wrong. I-Team investigative reporter Katie LaGrone shares his story tonight.
Outside Jimmy Klass's mobile home in Clearwater, symbols of American pride hang not just front and center, but on the side of his home, in the back. America is, after all, the only home this 66-year-old has ever known.
I moved to the U.S. in 1959.
How long have you been here?
64 years.
But after more than a half of a century in the U.S., where he's lived, worked, went to school, got married, had kids, paid his taxes,
Mr. Klass, you will be entitled to retirement benefits.
even voted, Klass says in 2020,
Instead of receiving my first check,
he discovered
I didn't have any thoughts.
he's not a U.S. citizen.
I just was like blindsided.
Klass says it all came to light after he applied for the Social Security benefits he paid into his entire working life.
You gotta be kidding me. You know, 1 month you tell me I should expect my first check, second Wednesday of 2020, but instead I get a letter stating that I haven't proven to them that I'm here legally.
You see, Klass was born in Canada, his mom Canadian, but his father American, born and raised in New York.
This is Dad?
Yep, that's Dad.
The family moved to the U.S. when Klass was 2 and stayed here.
That's me as a Boy Scout
In America.
in America.
As he got older, he says he just assumed he, too, was American, a dual citizen. Documents he laid out for us are a glimpse of his deep roots in the U.S.
This is when you know you're old, when the old driver's licenses were paper.
Roots, he says, were never questioned. Not when he got his Social Security card, driver's license, or voter registration card.
I've been voting for over 40 years. I guess I'm in a lot of trouble.
Klass was even approved to serve as a Marine for the U.S. military
I signed up to defend this country.
and work for the New Jersey State Police. His citizenship status, never an issue, he says.
The only thing they asked me for was my Social Security card and my driver's license.
After he learned he wasn't really a U.S. citizen, he formally applied for status, but was denied. U.S. Immigration Services wouldn't share details with us, stating they don't talk about individual cases. But in this 2022 denial letter, the agency stated Klass didn't provide enough evidence to prove his father lived in the U.S. for 10 years before Klass was born, a requirement.
I've seen a handful of cases like this. They don't come around every day.
Indira Demine is a Fort Myers-based immigration attorney. She says Klass's case is a reflection of a large, complicated, and changing U.S. immigration system that can't always accurately track who's here legally, illegally, or somewhere in between.
For many years, the DMV, the different agencies didn't necessarily communicate with each other. And so the documentation that you need to renew your driver's license or for the Social Security benefits were not as stringent as they are now.
How did he get issued a Social Security card, though?
That's a good question. Quite possible that back then, the requirements they have a social is just not the same as it is today.
So is it fair, though, that he was issued a Social Security card, he got his Social Security taxes withheld, he worked all of his life, he paid his taxes?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I worked my 50 years and I paid into my Social Security. They should be paying me.
What happens if this doesn't get resolved?
Well, I guess they get to give my money to someone else.
Will it make you look at America differently?
I'll probably move back to Canada.
You would consider leaving?
Yep, and say bye-bye America.
Klass says he contacted Senator Rubio's office, hired an immigration attorney, even a genealogist to dig up records to help him in his fight, a fight that continues.
Another Floridian now stepping forward to share her own citizenship nightmare. This after we first uncovered a Florida man who spent his entire life here living and working in America only to find out he's not a U.S. citizen.
And investigative reporter Katie LaGrone has an update on his case and speaks with a Florida woman now dealing with a similar citizen's crisis.
These are snapshots of Cynthia Downs' life on the farm in Chattahoochee, a small city just outside Tallahassee. The land and her husband's family for generations is where the couple have called home for more than 30 years. It's where they raised their girls, started their own hobby farm, and are well into training the next generation. For Cynthia, it's the perfect life for a small-town American girl who always assumed she was American.
I just didn't never think about nothing else because I paid my taxes. I've done everything everybody else done. I've been here all my life. And I'd never been to Canada except for when I was born, and I didn't remember that.
Cynthia's mom was Canadian, her dad American. She says the family moved to the States when she was just an infant. She's called America home ever since.
I've done everything everybody else does. There's never no red flags.
That is until she went to renew her driver's license a few years ago.
You find out that you're not an American citizen when you're 62 years old?
Yes, yes.
What did you think of that?
I thought it was crazy.
Since then, Cynthia says she's been fighting to prove her father's American roots, digging up school records, her dad's birth certificates. His military records were destroyed in a fire. Without this evidence, Cynthia's not eligible for dual citizenship, which means she won't be able to collect her Social Security retirement benefits.
About $2,000 a month.
This is a lot of money.
Yes, ma'am, it is for me.
You're getting emotional. Why?
Because it just tears me up every time because I just thought I'd done everything right. And it's come time that I get the money I earned, I can't get it.
Who do you blame?
I think it's the system.
Cynthia's citizenship fight isn't all that unique.
I just was like blindsided.
Last month, we introduced you to Jimmy Klass, also born in Canada, raised in America, and lived life as an American, even voted when he could.
I've been voting for over 40 years. I guess I'm in a lot of trouble.
Until Social Security refused to pay him his retirement benefits, claiming he wasn't a U.S. citizen.
How long have you been here?
64 years.
Our story about Klass went viral,
This one was from the New York Post. Citizen came. Social Security shock.
attracting new attention from Senator Marco Rubio, whose office confirmed they are in touch with Klass to, quote, offer assistance.
I'm not quitting. Not quitting. I'm going to get my Social Security.
Immigration attorneys, including Cynthia's, tell us what's happening to her and Jimmy Klass is a result of America's complex, confusing, and constantly changing immigration system.
It's a reflection of a poor system, poor communication, and a breakdown over many years by different agencies. No one pointed out to either of the people that we're talking about that they didn't have proof of citizenship. No one ever asked for that until they were approaching retirement. That's a big problem.
Now, Cynthia and Jimmy are learning later in life what they believe they should have been told decades earlier.
I'm supposed to be retired. You know, my pension and Social Security, that's what I work for. I get my pension, but I don't get my Social Security.
What do you want the government to know about you and why this should get taken care of?
The same as every American in this world. I've been here, I paid my taxes, and I expect to get my little Social Security back. It's just not fair.
Cynthia and Jimmy have both hired immigration attorneys to help them. Jimmy tells us he even got a visit from the FBI earlier this week, who told him to withdraw his voting registration until his citizenship issues are resolved, or he would be arrested.
This week, we're celebrating what it means to be an American. But for the past month, investigative reporter Katie LaGrone has exposed how some Floridians are facing little-known barriers to becoming legal U.S. citizens.
And tonight, Katie shares the story of a veteran who joined the United States military under the promise of American citizenship, but tells us what he got instead were broken promises.
Bye, Boo.
Paul Canton is headed to work near his home in Ocala. On this day, a neighbor gives him a ride.
I have somebody who gives me a ride to work, and then I get a ride home. Once I get a ride home, here I am.
It's not that Canton doesn't know how to drive. It's that he's not legally allowed to. He can't get a driver's license or even an ID card.
I kind of feel like I'm under house arrest. I can't go anywhere, do anything. There's a lot of restrictions with no identification. Can't even go cash a check.
That's because Canton isn't a legal U.S. citizen, never has been, even though he spent the last 30 years living like one.
These are some of the awards that I was given while I was in the military.
It all started when Canton, who was born in New Zealand and raised in Australia, says he was recruited to join the U.S. military. That's right, Canton isn't American, but he's got all the goods to show he served as an American soldier in the U.S. Marines. Which is how he explains his citizenship crisis began.
I was told if I got an honorable discharge, then I would get citizenship at the end of my tour.
Automatically? And then what happened?
I got out, assumed I had citizenship, I voted, I did everything a citizen would do.
He got married here, raised his kids, paid his taxes, even voted in U.S. elections. Until a trip to his local DMV to renew his driver license a few years ago, quite literally,
Kind of shock.
stopped him in his American tracks.
I figured somehow somebody had, forgot to push a button or do something. I didn't think it was going to be anything, here's my paperwork, here's my military service, and it was going to be done.
It wasn't, and 5 years later, still isn't.
It seems like every time we go back and try and deal with this, it's just another door closed.
According to federal immigration law, foreigners who serve in the U.S. military are eligible for citizenship if they serve during a period of hostility. Canton enlisted during the Gulf War in the early 90s, but he didn't become active duty for another 7 months after that period of hostility ended, which, according to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration, made all the difference on his path to calling America home.
He served our country. This is not fair.
Elizabeth Ricci is Canton's immigration attorney, working pro bono to help him solve what she says is a common practice by America's government.
They are told by recruiters, who, by the way, get a bonus for the number of recruits they sign up, we'll take care of it. We'll get your citizenship. Don't worry about it.
Ricci and Canton are now taking his case to federal court. But the notion of America recruiting foreigners into its military under false promises isn't new.
Unfortunately, it is not new. It has been going on for many years.
Rose Carmen Goldberg is director of the Veterans Law Practicum at UC Berkeley School of Law. Earlier this year, the group released this report detailing America's long history of recruiting immigrants to serve our country only to abandon them after service. The report, titled Broken Promises.
This problem is so big that the federal government itself doesn't even know the scope of the problem.
In terms of the numbers of people, is there any way to quantify that?
Rough estimates are hundreds or thousands. No one knows.
In an email, a spokesperson from the Department of Defense said it does not sanction bringing immigrants into the U.S. military under false promises of obtaining citizenship, but goes on to state while non-citizens who enlist under the law are qualified for expedited naturalization, those pursuits are between the individual and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services.
It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Paul Canton doesn't know what his future in America holds. After he joined America's military, he lost his citizenship in Australia, leaving the father of two and recent widow.
She's still here because if we buried her, I've got no way to go visit with her.
Essentially stateless and pleading for America to give what he says it promised when he stepped up to fight and defend her.
Why are you fighting this so hard?
I've got nowhere else to go.
U.S. Citizenship and Immigration not commenting on Paul Canton's case, telling us they don't discuss individual cases. But a spokesperson says they recognize the sacrifice of veterans and are committed to properly adjudicating applications. Canton, meantime, is still waiting for his first hearing in federal court.
New developments from our I-team on a story that we first brought you about a Florida veteran who served our country honorably but is now being denied U.S. citizenship. Well, tonight, investigative journalist Katie LeGrone found out this veteran is now getting support from people in very unlikely places.
1 week since we brought you his story, we've heard from viewers, some critical, others outraged over what former U.S. Marine Paul Canton is dealing with. Canton has also heard from viewers, a California attorney and podcaster, a veterans advocate, even the office of U.S. Congressman and Floridian Gus Bilirakis. All of them saw our story about Canton's citizenship fight and want to help.
I think it's pointed out what's happening to the foreign-born vets that hasn't been publicly stated before. It's kind of all gone underneath the radar, and Nobody's heard anything about it. Well, there's so many of us, and they've been deported without a voice. So thank you for giving me the voice.
Canton, born in New Zealand and raised in Australia, was recruited into the Marines in 1991 during the Gulf War. At the time, he claims, a recruiter told him after he discharged honorably, he would be granted U.S. citizenship. So Canton assumed he was and lived here as an American, got married, had kids, even voted as an American. Until just a few years ago when he went to renew his driver license and was told he wasn't a U.S. citizen. Despite multiple attempts to become legal, Immigration Services denied him, telling him while he enlisted during a period of hostility, he wasn't called for active duty until after that period of hostility ended, making him ineligible for expedited naturalization as a foreign veteran. Canton and his attorney filed a lawsuit against the federal government about a year ago, but they're still waiting for his first hearing. Meantime, a spokesperson from Congressman Bilirakis' office tells me they are looking into whether or not they will advocate on his behalf.
Folks who came to the United States to serve and protect with the promise of becoming U.S. citizens. But somewhere along the way, they ended up being kicked out of the country after they fought to protect it. Tonight, ABC Action News investigative reporter Katie LaGrone continues her eye-opening look at veterans who were denied citizenship. Tonight, sharing the story of one man who hoped to become an American but instead was deported.
Speaking to us from an apartment in San Diego, David Bario's American story
I came here to further my education.
began more than 2 decades ago and nearly 10,000 miles away.
I was born in Nairobi, Kenya.
In 1998, Bario came to America on a student visa. While here, he says he was persuaded by an Army recruiter to enlist, promising him free school and U.S. citizenship.
I was like, okay, that's interesting.
Bario joined, serving in the Army and eventually the Air Force Reserves.
For the love of serving the country, for the love of defending the Constitution.
But by 2007, Bario says he was forced to leave the military after his recruiter was court-martialed and found guilty of unlawfully enlisting African national students, among them Bario. While Army discharge papers he provided us show he was honorably discharged for an erroneous entry, Army investigative records he also provided us appear to detail how Bario was one of dozens of Kenyan students recruited in a fraudulent enlistment scheme.
My recruiter was fraudulently recruiting internationals to meet his quota, a recruiting quota.
We reached out to the Army about the case and have not heard back. But what happened to Bario after he left the military inspired him to talk about it publicly.
It's difficult to explain what reasoning they used to justify my deportation.
Bario, who thought he was legally enlisted when he joined the military, was stripped of his military certification and VA card and deported back to Kenya. But not before he says he also spent a year detained in a Texas migrant detention center.
I don't know if they were trying to make me give up. I don't know if they were trying to radicalize me and make me fight the system or say bad things about the United States.
Bario is among an unknown number of U.S. veterans who honorably served in America's armed forces but then got deported without the American citizenship and other benefits they claim they were promised.
This problem is so big that the federal government itself doesn't even know the scope of the problem.
The rarely talked about issue highlighted by the Veterans Law Practicum at UC Berkeley in this recent report titled Broken Promises.
Despite being required to do so, they are not tracking the number of veterans they deport. There are requirements in place saying that military service is supposed to be taken into account during immigration proceedings. That rule has not been followed.
When asked for a response about deported veterans and the allegations of broken citizenship promises they face, the Department of Defense referred us to the Veterans Administration, who told us in a lengthy email they are working with the Department of Homeland Security to, quote, identify and prioritize the return of current and former U.S. military members who were removed from the United States and helping them access benefits including immigration and naturalization assistance.
This is a veteran issue, it's not an immigration issue. Because we were veterans when we got deported.
In 2022, 14 years after he was deported, Bario was allowed back into America through a new government program for deported veterans. A few months later, he finally got the U.S. citizenship he says he was promised by that recruiter decades earlier.
It was overdue. I was happy.
Today, the dad of two is going to school to become a nurse. He's also co-founder of a support group for deported veterans, hoping his story raises awareness about a problem facing some who come to this country to defend it, but are ignored when they need the saving.
Deported veterans are dying across the borders. They know about us, but when you're trying to get back the legal way, we have so many blockades, it becomes a complicated mess.
While Bario has his legal status, he's still fighting for the GI benefits he says he was promised, which would help him pay for school. But despite everything he's been through, he tells me he considers himself a proud American. You seem genuinely surprised by his story.
Yes, I am surprised.
We are following through tonight as this U.S. Congresswoman is calling for action after our I-Team investigation exposed one Florida veteran's fight for citizenship decades after he served our country honorably. And tonight, investigative journalist Katie Legron's ongoing series, Citizenship Struggles, continues with this brand new update.
I kind of feel like I'm under house arrest. I can't go anywhere, do anything.
So, Congresswoman, I just wanted to get your response to this story, his story.
Well, Katie, your reporting is very eye-opening and it is very troubling. I had no idea that this was happening.
U.S. Congresswoman Castor responds to the plight of Florida veteran Paul Canton.
I've got nowhere else to go. I'm stateless.
A former U.S. Marine who served America honorably, but whose personal quest to become a legal U.S. citizen has been a losing battle.
For Mr. Canton to serve in the Marine Corps for 8 years and to be left high and dry by the United States of America that he was brave enough to defend, he should be treated like royalty in this country.
We first introduced you to Canton back in July, when the father of two who was born in New Zealand and raised in Australia shared how he was recruited into the U.S. Marines in the early 90s under what he calls false promises.
I was told if I got an honorable discharge, then I would get citizenship at the end of my tour.
Automatically?
I assumed that.
And then what happened?
I got out, assumed I had citizenship.
But 5 years ago, during a trip to renew his Florida driver license, Canton learned he wasn't here legally. He's been fighting for status ever since, and losing. The government saying while he enlisted during a period of hostility, he didn't actually serve until after that period ended, making him ineligible for citizenship as a foreign veteran.
If he had served and was honorably discharged, there should be no fight from the U.S. government at this point when he goes and applies for U.S. citizenship, as long as he has dotted the I's, crossed the T's, stayed out of trouble. We shouldn't waste resources fighting that. We should be making sure that he is a productive U.S. citizen as his service entitles him to.
This problem is so big that the federal government itself doesn't even know the scope of the problem.
Castor, a Democrat from Tampa, also expressing concerns after we found what's happening to Canton could be impacting hundreds, possibly even thousands of foreign veterans also recruited to serve in America's armed forces.
There has to be a way to make sure that military veterans who served us and have earned their citizenship to get that citizenship without the bureaucratic mess that he's having to go through.
Castor now looking at supporting legislation reintroduced last year by Senator and Army veteran Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. It would prohibit veterans from getting deported and help them get citizenship through their military service. Meantime, Canton plans to keep fighting in federal court.
New developments from our I-Team tonight about a Florida veteran still fighting for American citizenship decades after serving honorably in the U.S. military. Tonight, he gets hit with yet another setback. I-Team investigator Katie Legron first brought you Paul Canton's story last month, and tonight she brings us new developments from his ongoing federal court case.
Do you feel like this is a major blow to your case?
I do. I'm disheartened that the law of the country I served is not taking into account my military service or extenuating circumstances.
Recent court rulings in Paul Canton's fight for U.S. citizenship are leaving this former U.S. Marine on the losing side of his battle. Canton, who says he was recruited into the U.S. military under false promises of citizenship 3 decades ago, has been fighting for his right to stay for the past 5 years when he discovered he wasn't here legally.
I gave the government a blank check for my body up until and including death, and with the agreement I'd get citizenship when I got out.
After his citizenship application was denied twice, he took his case to federal court last year. But last month, a federal judge tossed 2 of the 3 charges Canton brought against the government. The judge essentially ruling the courts have no jurisdiction over who Citizenship and Immigration Services approves and who it denies.
We weren't asking for anything but what we've already earned.
At issue when Canton, who was born in New Zealand and raised in Australia, enlisted into the U.S. Marines versus when he actually served. According to federal immigration law, foreigners who honorably served during a period of hostility are eligible to apply for citizenship when they get out. While Canton enlisted during the Persian Gulf War in the early 1990s, he wasn't called for active duty until just after that period of hostility ended.
We shouldn't even be having this conversation where we are cutting hairs to see when this Marine served. The point is he served honorably.
Elizabeth Ricci is an immigration attorney working Canton's case pro bono. She's making this third and final argument in court, hoping it sticks.
You seem genuinely surprised by his story.
Yes, I am surprised.
Meantime, Canton's story has gotten the attention of Florida U.S. Congresswoman Castor.
For Mr. Canton to serve in the Marine Corps for 8 years and to be left high and dry by the United States of America that he was brave enough to defend, he should be treated like royalty in this country.
These are some of the awards that I was given while I was in the military.
Canton, who's considered stateless after losing his Australian citizenship when he joined the U.S. military, recently started writing letters to the White House.
What do you hope the president can do for you?
Executive order to grant me citizenship so I can move beyond this.
If this doesn't get resolved, Paul, what happens to you?
I've got no country. Where are they going to send me? I don't really understand why this big fight, this big push to deny me what I've already earned.
Throughout his campaign, President-elect Donald Trump has made immigration reform a top priority. Yet there's one man here in Tampa Bay who's been fighting for U.S. citizenship, and he believes Trump may be the one to help.
The Florida veteran who served our country honorably continues being denied legal status here in the United States. I-Team investigator Katie LaGrone first told you about Paul Canton's immigration fight this summer. Well, she recently had a new conversation with the veteran and finds out why he now feels hopeful in this long journey.
Paul, it has been a couple months since we've caught up. Where does your citizenship case stand?
We're still waiting to hear from the Fifth Circuit on the trial date. I am hopeful with the new administration that they will hear my pleas and to legalize.
You're actually feeling good about the Trump administration hearing your case and helping you?
Yes, I do.
With his son by his side, U.S. veteran Paul Canton tells us he's now looking at newly elected President Donald Trump as his last shot to securing U.S. citizenship.
I'm hoping that with a change, we'll also get a change in something happening with the case and moving it forward. Maybe get different people looking at it and get a positive outcome.
Earlier this summer, we first told you about the former U.S. Marine's years-long battle to become a legal U.S. citizen after serving the country honorably.
These are some of the awards that I was given while I was in the military.
Canton, who joined the U.S. Marines in the early 1990s, says he was recruited with the promise of U.S. citizenship when he got out.
I was told if I got an honorable discharge, then I would get citizenship at the end of my tour.
Automatically? And then what happened?
I got out, assumed I had citizenship.
Nearly 3 decades later, during a trip to renew his Florida driver license, Canton discovered he wasn't here legally. Since then, his fight to become a legal American citizen has been a losing battle, the government repeatedly rejecting the veteran, saying while he was recruited during the Persian Gulf War, he didn't get called for active duty until after that period of hostility ended, making him ineligible for citizenship as a foreign veteran. Canton even took the case to federal court, where it remains hanging by a thread.
Katie, your reporting is very eye-opening.
U.S. Congresswoman Castor responded to Canton's plight.
He should be treated like royalty in this country.
But offered no real solutions, while handwritten letters to President Biden remain unanswered, leaving this veteran hoping fresh eyes in the Oval Office will give him a fresh start.
President Trump, one of his main pillars has been illegal immigration and getting people who are here illegally out of the country. Does that give you pause in your own situation?
No, because I'm a war veteran and I served this country and legally enlisted and went through with an honorable discharge, so I've served the country. I'm just asking for what I've already earned.
Deportation is not necessarily something that you fear.
No.
Because
I've got nowhere to go. I mean, being stateless, where are they going to send me? All my family's here, both my boys and my stepson. I don't think the administration be that heartless to separate a war veteran from their family members. It just comes down to having somebody who has the proper, I guess, power to look at the paperwork and say, hey, yes, it's good.
I know President Trump pretty well, and he listens.
Coming up tomorrow, this Republican U.S. Congressman weighs in on Canton's citizenship battle, what he told us that could finally make this U.S. veteran a U.S. citizen. My interview with U.S. Congressman Bilirakis tomorrow.
A U.S. congressman now pledging to help a Florida veteran whose battle for U.S. citizenship keeps getting denied.
Yeah, for months now, I-Team investigator Katie Legrone has reported on Paul Canton's struggles to become an American citizen after honorably serving in the U.S. Marines. Last night, here on ABC Action News at 6, he shared why President-elect Donald Trump could be his last shot.
And new here tonight, Republican Congressman Bilirakis now taking notice and telling Katie how he might be able to help.
this is the case of Paul Canton that we have been covering since the summer.
U.S. Congressman Bilirakis is a strong veterans advocate.
He serves honorably, gets discharged honorably.
Which is why we thought he should know about the struggle facing Florida veteran Paul Canton, who honorably served in the U.S. Marines, but whose quest to become a U.S. citizen is closing in on a 5-year-long losing battle.
Every day I wake up, click on my email, hoping to hear from my attorney that I've got a court date, and it's just kind of like a bad version of Groundhog Day, hoping that today's going to be the day that something changes, something moves.
Canton, who was born in New Zealand and raised in Australia, first told us over the summer how he was recruited into the U.S. Marines in the early 1990s under what he described was the false promise of citizenship when he got out.
I was told if I got an honorable discharge, then I would get citizenship at the end of my tour.
But during a trip to renew his driver license 5 years ago, Canton learned he wasn't here legally. He's been fighting for legal status ever since, and now hopes a new administration could give his citizenship case a fresh look.
Should this veteran, do you believe, get the citizenship?
Well, I want to look at the details.
Which is where Congressman Bilirakis, a longtime Republican lawmaker on Florida's West Coast, could help. Bilirakis is a strong ally of President-elect Donald Trump, even earning the incoming president's endorsement this year.
I know President Trump pretty well, and he listens.
It's the kind of political alliance with America's next president that could help this foreign-born U.S. veteran desperately seeking American status.
You have illegal aliens crossing the border that haven't given anything to this country. Then you have somebody that has earned the right to receive care from the VA and be called a veteran.
Bilirakis tells us he also plans to talk to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and incoming Veteran Affairs Secretary, Doug Collins.
The incoming VA Secretary is a good friend of mine, Doug Collins. So I will bring this up to him, and I'd like to look into this further, contact the individual, and see what we can do. Sounds like he's done enough to earn the citizenship.
The question remains, will America agree?
I'll look into it, I promise you that.
I'm I-Team investigator Katie Legrone taking action for you.